Americans in society and reveal new questions around the public perception and dominant narratives that impact Native peoples within the U.S. Among the most groundbreaking and historic moments for Indian country and the visibility of Native leadership came in 2018, when Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids became the first two Native American women elected to Congress, and Peggy Flanagan was also elected in 2018 as Minnesota Lieutenant Governor. She became the country's highest-ranking Native woman elected to executive office. Deb Haaland went on in 2021 to be confirmed as the first Native person to serve as the Secretary of the Department of Interior and to serve as a cabinet secretary. Secretary Haaland, Congresswoman Davids, and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan have become powerful symbols, agents, and sources of inspiration for the visibility and power building for Native peoples and women. We are so honored today to be joined by Congresswoman Sharice Davids and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. We will discuss their historic journeys as Native politicians, how far we have come as Native peoples in the last 6 years, and what are the pathways that exist for disrupting an invisibility and erasure for Native peoples in the future. So welcome, ladies. It's so good to have you here with me.
So nice to see your faces.
Thanks for having us. I'm ready. This is a crew that I like to hang out with. So,
where are you each joining us from today?
Well, I'm in Kansas. I'm at home in Kansas in the district for the week.
And I am coming to you from my office / place where my daughter plays the piano, and just from my home here in Minnesota. And if you hear a dog bark, I apologize, but Ruben, 15-year-old Dachshund Greyhound mix, cannot be tamed. So,
and nor should he.
That's right.
Exactly. Well, we were so sad that you weren't able to join all of us in Muckleshoot, where we're all gathering for our first ever Native Visibility and Power convening, where we're sharing, the foundational research that led to the forming of Illuminative, but so much more and so much bigger than Illuminative 6 years ago with the Reclaiming Native Truth Project. But we're so glad that we can be in conversation with you here today. So, when I look back and as I, think about this trajectory of this work, 2018 was a really big year, to say the least, and especially for both of you, but, for Indian country, for this country. And, I really remember like this incredible moment when I first heard about, you, Congresswoman, Representative Davids, when you won. I remember meeting you at Thunder Valley. You were looking at Thunder Valley, right?
Call me Sharice.
Sharice.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you stuck your head out the door and went, yo, hey. But I can remember, I think it was after your election and up at Capitol Hill, there was a reception for the two of you along with Deb, and seeing the three of you stand there and just, you could have heard a pin drop in that room and tears being shed. And I just, what a time, right? And so, I mean, Sharice, you've broken not only a couple boundaries, being one of the first two Native women, but also the first, LGBTQ Native American in Congress as well from your state. And when you reflect back to your run and your election in that moment, what can you share? Was it surprising to you? I mean, what comes to your mind about that time?
I mean, one of the things I can say is surprising is that there had not been Native women in Congress before. Now Secretary Haaland, she abandoned me, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm very happy that she's the Secretary of Interior, of course. But I do remember just being kind of shocked at the fact that there had not been Native women elected to Congress or any of that before. But it was mostly because I know so many Native women who are smart and powerful and driven and all of the things that make Native women so awesome. And so I remember being more shocked that there had not been Native women in Congress before. I remember during that time, it was so chaotic because we had just gotten elected, and it turns out you can't really prepare yourself for something like being elected to Congress, mentally. But what I remember is just the intensity of the number of people who came out. Peggy, I don't know if you remember, but the three of us were in this little room.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not actually a little room. It was, one of the rooms on the hill at the Capitol, and the three of us were there, and we were getting pictures with like young people and elders, and it was like there were so many people, and that was just on the hill. And then we went to the gathering, the celebration that you were talking about, Crystal. And I remember thinking and I get goosebumps now thinking about it, how so many people from all over the country showed up for something that we got to celebrate. It wasn't because people were angry, rightfully so, oftentimes angry about a policy or about something that has happened. It was because Indian country had this like awesome thing to celebrate. And I just remember thinking how phenomenal it was that we got to do that. And it's probably that's a core memory that I'll have for the rest of my life.
I'm totally tearing up thinking about that. And I just remember being in line, like everybody was walking up to get their pictures taken with the three of you, but there were two young ladies in front of me. One of them, I think, was a princess, powwow princess, like I can't remember where from, but she was literally shaking. They both were. And it was just like, these superheroes, and they just could barely get the words out. And they were like so excited and tears and shaking. And I just, I'll never forget it. And I think for you, Lieutenant Governor, I remember we were somewhere in the middle of doing the Reclaiming Native Truth Project, and we were meeting in Minneapolis or St. Paul, I think it was. And I remember you came to that meeting. It was like really on. We were still doing the research, right? And then you were getting ready to, make the run. And I remember one of your early campaign videos, you actually used some of the data from Reclaiming Native Truth in your video. And we were like, what? It was like, okay, I don't need to do anything else. That's it. I'm done. That is cool. What was, when you reflect back and look at that, even that campaign, right? And what that was like to run as a Native woman, what was that experience like? What surprised you? What was challenging? What was exciting?
I think about that night when we were all together, and my husband got a photo of Sharice and I on the steps of the United States Capitol taking a selfie. And every time it like pops up in my memories, it is just like a warm hug. And we didn't know what was in store for us. And the innocence of that moment, right?
Cute.
Yeah, but it was so powerful. And I remember I was Senator Tina Smith's guest for the State of the Union in 2019. And all of a sudden I hear whoop, whoop. And I look down on the floor, and it's Deb and Sharice like waving at me. And it was just this sort of moment. And I was rocking a ribbon skirt, and there was another woman from Montana who had one across the way. And I was like, I see you and we see them, and it's all happening. So that was, those are absolutely core memories and things that I think about when I'm like, why do we do this? But, in 2018, it was really important to me, and it was really important to the governor, then Congressman Walz, that we go to every Native nation who shares their geography with Minnesota and do that, right, on the campaign trail before we get into office. And then, we've been able to continue to do really high level engagement with tribes. But that was important. And it was because, we wanted to make sure that folks knew we weren't taking their votes for granted simply because there was a Native woman on the ballot. We had to earn it. Spending that time was really meaningful, and also an incredible reminder for me about you are responsible to the people of Minnesota, and you are responsible to your own people. The weight of that, but also the absolute honor to be able, to do that. And I would say, we kicked off our campaign at the Minneapolis American Indian Center in the gymnasium, which is this iconic location, for folks. It's like the birthplace of the American Indian movement, and, gave this speech, and my kid came up with me, and she just sat down on the stage and just watched me give my speech. and seeing like my community, I'm a member of White Earth, and I am a proud member of the urban Native community in Minneapolis. Like, to be there to kick it off, that's when we decided to do it, was so powerful, and I think lent itself to the rest of the campaign and how we tried to run. It really was like, and I felt fueled, frankly, by my sisters who were also running, right, for Congress, that we, were, although we were in different states, really were doing this together.
Such a joyous and incredible, time. But I think, like, and this is a question I have to both of you. So you're elected, right? And as we think about this, in 2018, when we first published this research, right, the research was telling us that nearly 80% of Americans knew little to nothing about us. And what little they knew was just basically informed by crap, right? Like toxic stereotypes and, our only representation in TV and film is anything before 1900. People don't learn about us in school. They can't even conceive of us as contemporary Native peoples. And I'm sure you, at some point, each of you have been asked if you live in a teepee, right? Like that's just what we navigate.
The funny thing is, I guess it's one of those things, because it's funny because it's true, because that people ask things that bless their hearts.
That's wild. Yep.
Well, but like you said, what a shock that there has never been any Native women, that have served in Congress, or, so I guess for each of you, as you came in, right, and you are political leaders elected from diverse constituencies, right? And so you're there representing everyone from, your district, your state, so on and so forth. But as you got into Congress, or as you got into, Minnesota state government, did you still kind of run into that, like people having a hard time navigating you as a political leader? I'm just curious.
When I gave my retirement speech on the floor of the House in 2018, because I knew that no matter what, I wasn't coming back. I'd either be Lieutenant Governor or not. And I gave my speech, and one of my colleagues came up to me and he was like, "Hey, Flanagan, I didn't know that you were Native American. I thought they all were dead," like legit. And in that moment, I sort of didn't know what to do, other than like, you clearly haven't been paying attention to any time I've gotten up and made a speech, so that's weird.
I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, but I was like, surprise, right? Like, we're still here.
And that was the day that Peggy came out as a Native.
That's right, exactly. That's when I came out of the Indian closet. Like, but it was just, and I said, there are likely Native people in your district. I was like, because we're everywhere, right? But it was experiences like that, and I think it still remains that there are assumptions made about Native leaders. But I think it's changing, and I'm grateful that it's changing. And I would say, because of the data and research that Illuminative did, it actually, as a Native woman running for office, gave me, right, like a foundation to stand on, but also to speak from. Because when you can say like 40% of Americans don't realize we're contemporary people, that hits people, right? Like they're like, oh, I had no idea. And so, and if you continue to think of Native people as relics of the past, that we are not contemporary, you can pass policies that are hurtful. You don't have to invest in our communities. And frankly, you don't have to do any kind of research or acknowledge the land on which you live every single day. And so those things still happen. I think it's gotten much better, but that was sort of as I was starting the campaign, like that conversation was like, what? So just knowing that there were just many teachable moments, right? Like on the on the campaign trail. And I'm sure, Sharice, you had your fair share of teachable moments as well.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, there's been teachable moments, and I think that exactly what you were just talking about is part of what I do feel like having more of us in these positions, also more of us who are able to demonstrate the broad, diverse not just experiences, but thoughts and opinions and like approaches that exist in Indian country. Because to say that we're contemporary people, I think is one piece of it, because I have always felt all the things, upset, sad, frustrated, angry sometimes at the fact that people often only think of Native people as a relic, I think is one of the words you guys used, of in the historical context. And I feel like having out here, being the broad, diverse people that we are, I feel like, Peggy, you and we've gotten to spend so much time around each other, and we have, we're both obviously funny, but we're also very different people. And I kind of love that just between me, you, and Deb, when we're doing things, you can tell we're very different people when we talk about stuff, the way we talk about stuff, the way we think about stuff. And that is just as important, because
That's right.
I feel like when you are talking about that high of a percentage of people knowing literally nothing about Indian country, if they only get to see one type of contemporary Native woman, then that might actually end up harming policies that would get created in the future. And so I think that I think there's like this element of the diversity of Indian country being shown through the lens of the contemporary experience that not just we're having, but even Crystal and the work that you're doing. And, when we came into Congress, Joy Harjo was the poet laureate. And so they're and like very different people. We're very like, you don't want me out here writing poems, And so I like, these are the kinds of things too that I think are pretty phenomenal about the place that we're in right now with Native people, both getting elected to various offices, but also just being more seen and heard on tons of different platforms in lots of different sectors.
Absolutely. And it's not, it's not an accident, in my opinion, right, that in 2018, we had our elections. There's been more and more Native people who've been running for office, but also we saw finally, right, contemporary shows like comedies, dramas, right, like Natives playing Natives, and Reservation Dogs, Rutherford Falls, where we're able to non-Natives and folks find that entertaining. Like, I love it, but it's also one of the most powerful tools in our toolbox for folks to see, right, varying degrees of just different Native experiences, and that's just only increasing. And I think Illuminative has done such a good job of supporting that work, and I think it's just deeply connected. The more people watch pop culture that is accurate and is done really well, the easier my job becomes, because people don't make a ton of assumptions, right? Because through entertainment, but it's a really powerful tool.
It's truly remarkable when you think about how many things have happened in the last 6 years for our people, like post Standing Rock, right? Yeah. But I was thinking, we had all this research, right, that was like, holy cow, like, seriously, like the majority of people just don't think we exist anymore. Okay, like, that's a hard pill to swallow. But then I remember as we were going through the project, we convened like a smaller subset of Native leaders and grassroots organizers, to kind of envision what would the next 10 years look like. And we talked about politics and entertainment and education. We went down. I don't think we had getting Native women elected to like the highest offices or appointed in the land. I don't even think that was even something to be imagined. I think people were hoping to see more leaders in general, but like, it was just, I just remember that was hard to dare to imagine, right? Or if that's 10 years. And I also remember that I think it was about 10 years before anyone predicted the way that we would have like a Native film or Native actor nominated for an Oscar, right? And to see like what Lily's been able to do, right? So I think it's incredible, but I think it's a movement of many movements, right? And I love what you were saying, Sharice, because it's also the diversity of seeing, you know, all of you women in these different offices. And like you said, very different, you know, leaders and peoples and the way that you know, express yourselves. I think that's been part of it. I think there's just like levels of organizing that are happening in Hollywood and in grassroots, you know, places, so much as you all have been part of a very big narrative change that I think we're finally seeing. And we're going to be sharing more information today about kind of the latest report card on our visibility, which, you know, has increased in some ways. In other ways, it's so profound still. There's so much to do. But I would just, you know, as I look, one of the things that's made me so proud, and I've talked to a lot of like leaders in media, for example, who are like, well, we don't want to book Native Americans on, you know, news shows and other things because they can only talk about Native issues. And I was like, right? And there's like that kind of perception, and nobody cares about Native issues because, you know, and it's like, you know, guess what? Native people can talk about healthcare and the economy and jobs and all kinds of things. And so it's kind of like a two-part reflection of like, you know, where were people always trying to like pigeonhole you? And like, because you both are very outspoken. I mean, and leaders of diverse constituencies and leaders on big issues. How is that? Has that been fine to navigate? Have people tried to pigeonhole you, or has that been really easy to show up in that way and not trying to have somebody just say, can you be super sacred? And
I mean, if I want to talk to somebody about transportation policy, I'm going to call Congresswoman Davids, right? Or about infrastructure. I think like that is the beauty too of like, we also need to lift each other up in our areas of policy expertise. You know, it's just true. Like, yeah, I can talk about those issues, like Native issues, because that's my lived experience. But I also care a lot about things like paid family and medical leave and childcare and a child tax credit and, you know, other really important policy pieces that like I'm an expert in. Not just because I'm Indigenous, right? But because that's, you know, where I decide to nerd out and really dig in. And like, we certainly carry, I think, an added level of responsibility for speaking to issues that are important for our community. But, you know, we should be able to speak to so many other things. And I think that is my hope, is that as we look forward for the next 10 years, that is something that folks, you know, start to think about. I want to see Sharice on MSNBC all the dang time, right? Like talking about not just about Indian issues, right? Or things that are directly connected to our identity, but because she's a badass policy expert. Like those are the things that I want to hear from her.
I think one of the things that I have like techniques that I use, because for sure people do. And my experience has been, since coming to Congress, my experience has been, it doesn't feel like people are trying to pigeonhole me as much as it feels like this is like one of most people's first opportunities to engage with someone who is familiar with Indian country and Native issues as a peer. And that is one of the things that I feel like in Congress, because there have been plenty of Natives who have worked on the Hill, who have advised senators and congresspeople and committees and even the president and that sort of thing. But there is a difference because it's the structure of the federal government. There's a difference between me having the opportunity to engage with a member of Congress as a peer than if I were there in their legislative shop, if I was, you know, on their legislative team. And so I think it's interesting because the experience that I've had, and maybe this is, you know, me rationalizing or something, I don't know, but I feel like a lot of times when people come to me, it's because they recognize that these are important things for them to know about. They do have an awareness. How they got that awareness, you know, and how recently is not something I often delve too much into, but it's something that is like, oh, I could ask Sharice, or I could ask Mary Peltola about Alaska Native stuff. And a lot of times what I tell people is absolutely come to me. If you have a question and you're not sure about something in Indian country, absolutely come to me. I can't tell you that I'm gonna be able to answer your question though, because there's like 574 tribes. And then I talk about how diverse and broad this issue sets are. for, and that like I can help you get connected with somebody who's an expert on that. But if you want to talk about infrastructure, if you want to talk like, let's get into some stormwater stuff here. I do think that certainly in other professional experiences I've had, you know, whether it was being an attorney, working in a large law firm, or in other places where the pigeonholing is definitely happens. Maybe I didn't feel empowered in, you know, in previous professional settings in the way that I do now, to be able to take that and recognize like, oh, this person is expressing an interest in something that's actually very important.
You know, I think when you know, again, you both, right, have become such powerful symbols, I think, for all of us as Native peoples, right? Like what's possible and how do we continue to dream even bigger, you know, but these just incredible narrative change moments that I just really wanted to reflect on for a minute. And, you know, I remember 2020, Peggy, and turning on the TV, and it was one of the first conferences after George Floyd's murder. Mm-hmm. And you walked up to the podium and you introduced yourself in Ojibwe. And then you spoke as Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota. And I just remember sitting there with my daughter, right, who's also part Red Lake Ojibwe and from Lower Sioux. We both cried, right, and thinking in that moment, you know. And then I'll never forget, you know, Sharice, the moment when you were in the speaker's chair, be like gabbling in, you know, and that like, and then there was another second beautiful picture. I think Deb was sitting in somebody's office watching you on TV as you were doing that. And just these, you know, and I just love hearing all of these, like, as we reflect back, like so many amazing things have happened. But I also, when I think back on the last 6 years, you all as leaders have had to navigate one of the hardest times in recent memory. Pandemics, you know, police violence, you know, revolutions in the streets, right? January 6th, all kinds of stuff, and increased polarization in this country, and some really, you know, troubling trends that, you know, suddenly diversity, equity, and inclusion is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'd love to hear from each of you, because it has been a lot, you know, what sticks out in your mind, but what got each of you through all of this in the last 6 years as leaders? And as women and human beings.
We just commemorated 4 years since the murder of George Floyd. It was a really heavy day, of course. And I think what has been so difficult about it is that on every post that I saw where someone talked about just the absolute tragedy of his murder and his daughter Gianna that he leaves behind, and how, you know, our hearts broke wide open, and just real grief, I think, for folks on display. The comments, the just like vile, disgusting, racist comments under almost every post that I saw, including my own. I don't usually read the comments. It is this moment that we're in where folks posted black squares, right, on Instagram, and suddenly philanthropy decided that they really wanted to dig in on this issue, and, you know, corporations were like, we are all in for DEI, and, you know, all of this was happening. And I think now, as I'm meeting with other Indigenous folks, with other people of color, especially in leadership positions, they're like, woof, the backlash, the backsliding is real. And even people who have been allies in like pretty significant ways are like, ooh, you know, and are really allowing the discomfort, right, to push them back from this work. And I would say that is contributing to the level of polarization and political discord, and just like general like cruelty and being mean. And that makes me really sad. And, you know, we have to continue to do this work. But what got me through that moment, and I think what continues to get me through this moment, I would say you all, and frankly, throughout the pandemic, our little Zoom calls, we're like telling on ourselves. But, you know, those conversations, those safe spaces where we could be together across all of these states and community was really, really important. And I think, you know, I had lost my dad in January of 2020, and then my brother was the first person in Tennessee, or the second person in Tennessee to pass away from COVID in March. There was just a lot of grief, and I sort of didn't know what to do except work right through it, because we have to keep people safe and we have to keep our people safe. And then the trauma of George Floyd, and wanting to be in the streets, having different expectations on me because of my role than maybe how I would have been before. I was grateful for masks because there were a handful of times when I went out there. And the reason I have been able to stay in this job is like my aunties, my remembering who the hell I am, you know, Gijiwewa Damukwe, like that has been the most important thing for me to be able to survive throughout this time. And just being able to be in community with people who like do not care that I'm a lieutenant governor. They're just like, oh, it's Peggy, right? Like, let's feed her, right? Or like whatever. Like those are the spaces I think that are like fill you up and then let you go back and to be able to do this work. And the reminder from my aunties who are like, we have been through this before, my girl. Like we have experienced these things before. Like you have this in you, you can do this. We've been able to overcome. And like, that's a really powerful tool, I think, that we all have to lean on that I don't know that everybody did as they sort of tried to navigate through the last 6 years.
No, thank you for sharing all that, Peggy. And, you know, Sharice, you and I have talked about this a lot over the years, right? Mm-hmm. I think, what is it that I'd like to say to you? Like, I don't think I would like to work where you work. Like, your workplace is crazy. There was like people trying to overthrow the government where you work. But yeah, I mean, like, again, what sticks out in your mind, you know, over the craziness of the last 6 years, it's been pretty intense as much as there's been amazing things, but what's gotten you through it?
I did not know what I was signing myself up for. I often say, humble brag, I do a lot of therapy. So I've definitely, I mean, I really did start doing like regular therapy after I started this job. To me, it's like for me to bring my full human self to this job, which I think is it's a necessary part of making sure that I stay grounded, is to know that I'm bringing my full self to the job, but doing it in a way where I'm not just reacting to things, but, you know, listening and thinking and breathing and responding. I have not been familiar with places where like the vast majority of people learn how to navigate big feelings and learn to respond and not react. And so like learning those things has absolutely helped, and it helped when we got to the pandemic, because I think the pandemic was this traumatizing experience for the entire country, for the entire world, and humans are not meant to be in that level of stress for that long. Right. There were things that I was learning along the way that were helping with that, and when you decide you're going to take on positions like these, that it really is the only option. You know, we signed up to make hard decisions, to show up at times when people need answers, and try to help figure out those answers, even if we don't know them right in the moment, at the exact moment that people need. There's some huge lessons that our society, I hope, learned from that. Certainly me personally. And then, you know, some of the other stuff is like truly learning how to be like manage the basic stuff, things that before this and all the stressors of life in the world, I feel like I kind of took it for granted that I would remember to do all the things like get enough sleep or drink enough water or eat. I legit have friends who will say, "Did you eat today?" And not just because they saw me, they'll just shoot me a text and say, "Hey, just checking in. How are you? You've been getting enough sleep? You eaten?" And so having that core group, whatever that is, you know, and it's aunties, cousins, friends, moms, my brother even. Don't tell him I said it. But yeah, so I think there's, you know, I didn't want to repeat too much of what Peggy had to say, but yeah.
You've had very unique, powerful experiences, right? I mean, like all of us watched, you know, Minneapolis on fire. and under siege, I mean, just so much. And, I'll remember January 6th, all of us texting you, Sharice and Deb, are you okay? And you were like, I've got Deb covered. Right? So, we want to say thank you.
I didn't mean to laugh when you said that about January 6th. It was more just, I do remember telling you guys, I've secured the package, and then I sent a picture of her with me in my office or something.
I feel like everyone in Indian country was like texting, like texting you all. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Don't worry, guys. I have a plan.
Right. I just imagine you with like Deb under your arm, like, I got
right.
Yeah. Right.
But it was,
throw her over my shoulder and head out.
Run out. You could carry her for sure.
Well, yeah. We got to get ready to wind down, but I think like this is a great segue, right? Because it is crazy town right now in this country, and reminder, maybe it's an understatement, I don't know. This is a C3 nonpartisan conversation. But there's a few things happening. I think the world could be a very different place come post-election 2024. And I think like to kind of bring it around, like when we first shared this research, it's not research like an academic. This is about organizing. This is about Indian country, collective strategy, organizing this movement of many movements, right, to achieve all of these things, the things that we want for, our tribal nations, our communities, our future generations. So here we are again. That's why we wanted to like redo it and do it now. And it seems like the perfect time because there are some major forces at play here. And I'm just curious, right, because every one of the folks, that are sitting in the audience today and they're out there listening are organizers, are people doing work in their communities. And I think a lot of us are like frustrated, exhausted, all the things. But, I guess what is the call to action is because we're going to be sitting here for the next 2 days talking about research, talking about how this connects with what's happening in Indian country, in this country, in this world. I would love to hear from each of you, your advice, your kind of call to action, things that you're hopeful or excited about and things you're super worried about.
Well, that's a really good question about advice. And I'm actually always hesitant to give advice in a call to action form, not because I don't have plenty of thoughts and opinions about things, but because I do think that the longer I do this job and I sit in this position as a federal elected, the more I recognize how essential it is for me to spend more time listening than dictating or saying like, oh, here's what you should be doing. And so the only thing I will say is no, I'm just kidding, is that I do think that something that worries me a lot right now is that we have so many people who are so I don't know, be in pain is like the only way I can think to say it. There are a lot of people who are in a lot of pain, and it doesn't mean physical. Some of it is physical, but some of it is like emotional, like turmoil. It feels like there's a lot of turmoil right now. And I often think in our society, one of the things that we get taught, mainstream society, not native, a lot of the native cultures that I've seen is that we tend to turn away from each other at times when we actually really need to be figuring out better ways to hold each other. And that is something that worries me is that the turmoil, I feel like should help us figure out how to come together more. And I don't mean in a Pollyanna kind of way, but I do mean us figuring out in our communities, with our loved ones, with our neighbors, with people that we're like acquaintances with, figuring out ways to turn toward each other rather than away. And that's something that I try to practice in the place that I'm in, where sometimes that can be a little bit difficult of a task.
That was very diplomatically put, that last part. I'm not going to name names of that might be a little bit.
They are.
But no, I love that. That is beautiful, and I couldn't agree more. So Peggy, yeah.
Siobhan had her 5th grade graduation this week, and as I was looking all around the gymnasium, as all these kids are singing and hyper and joyful, I literally was like, what kind of world are we leaving you, my girl? Like, that was like the thought in my head. It also was this moment where I kind of got that pain or that turmoil, that grief, that Sharice just talked about, that I think we're all kind of carrying right now. Mm-hmm. But I also thought, and my job is to prepare you for this world. And that means that you are going to know who you are. You're going to know where you come from, and you are going to try to, and I need to prepare you to do that work. And part of preparing her to do that work is to make sure that she knows that voting is a tradition in our family, that as Native women, we deserve to be counted, and that's actually not enough, that there are additional steps that we need to do to take care of our community, of making sure that once people are there, that they are working with us and listening to us. And I know that I'm an elected, but I think that that's also part of it, that it can be really, really difficult in this moment to look at the things that have gone well, but we have to. In these places and spaces where Native people are and maybe haven't been traditionally, right, in Congress, my daughter is like, oh, that's Auntie Sharice. Oh, Auntie Deb is the Secretary of the Interior. Auntie Jamie Becker Finn is the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the Minnesota House. This is simply just her reality. Wow. In a way that I had Geraldine Ferraro, right? Like 1984, which is nothing but love for Geraldine Ferraro. But it's this whole new moment. And she turns on the TV and, and she's able to see Lily Gladstone, and and that there are folks, or Jana, there are people who look like her in these places and spaces where we have never been. And so I know this is a hard moment, but listen, I will be damned if we're gonna go backwards without a fight. Mm-hmm. And so that is my hope, is that people take that on, that moving backwards with, DEI, suddenly not being able to be our full, beautiful selves, if that means Two-Spirit or LGBTQ, right? Or our trans youth, that's worth fighting for. And, I just believe that we deserve to be counted, and we deserve to be seen and heard and valued and protected and believed. And we have to just keep doing this work. And we do the work as long as we can, and then we hand it off to the next folks. And the best piece of, advice that I have in this moment is to simply do the next good thing. Every morning you get up and just do the next good thing. That's all that has ever been expected of us. And I think that is all that is expected of us. And it can feel like an act of revolution, right, to simply do the next good thing.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, that is feels like a dose of medicine, right? And I think we really all need that right now, and I can't thank you enough. We are so proud of all of you, of Sharice, of Deb, and of just so many. And it is so amazing to see how many, Native people have been inspired to run for office because of all of you. And so thank you. I know that's a really also close to your heart as well through your, co-founding Advanced Native Political Leadership. So we just want to send you prayers, and Sharice and Deb and all of our electeds, because this is a challenging time to be in elected office for sure.
Can I show you something?
Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta grab something. I'm right here. But it is in my office and still needs to be hung up, but it is very cool. And it is right on the money for what we are talking about here. But it's this. I don't know if you can see it, but it is postcards of the three of us from Emily's list. And it's just a powerful reminder of who we are, and You know, if I'm ever like, people are whack, like I can look at that and feel really good about like, who's good and who's on the team, you know?
I love that. Oh my God. Much love. Thank you so much. And just thank you for just being a champion also for this work and for, you know, Native organizers all over. And yeah, this was just great conversation. Good medicine.